Taiki Shinzawa. To some, when they hear that that name is on a game, they need to rush out to whatever online game store they can find in Japan and get a hold of, hopefully, some kind of available copy of whatever game it is. For others, like us, we have had a bit of a mixed bag, with some of his games being in our top 50 games of all times, but other games, like the one that we did for our last review on one of his games, Pseudoboros, it makes us feel a bit more like Paul Hollywood on the Great British Baking Show. Yes, there is a bit of a showstopper, but overall the product feels a little bit underbaked. But in either case, people definitely know that when they get a game from him, it is going to at least be interesting. It's going to do something that they haven't seen before. So what happens when a designer that is known for interesting and sometimes complex mechanisms teams up with one of the biggest kids book publishers in Japan? Minasan konnichiwa and welcome to the Board Game Dojo, where today we are covering Taiki Shinzawa's Pin Combi Trio, which is published by Shogakukan, one of the biggest book publishers in Japan, known mostly for the acclaimed manga Doraemon. So what does it mean when Shinzawa teams up with a book publisher known mostly for family books? Well, it means that for once you're going to get a nice, clear rulebook that is nice and short. These are mostly pictures, but it is also all in Japanese. And so, like in our other videos, we are going to provide a tutorial for this in this video. So you can go ahead and skip around on the timestamps that I will leave below if you want to just skip right to the final review. But before we begin, another congratulations to all of our winners of all of the games that we've been giving away this month. Every week this month we have been giving away games. We've given away Anansi, we've given away Yuri Yuri Penguin, we've given away Kafia. And so it's been a lot of fun doing that. And again, you can keep on entering by leaving YouTube comments or leaving us 5-star reviews on our podcast app. We're gonna have to figure out a better way, I think, to do this, because luckily this time around, most of the people have been also following us on Instagram or Twitter, so I've been able to direct message them. It feels a bit icky calling out usernames on YouTube and on a podcast for some reason. Especially if it's like, okay, if it's a YouTube thing and shouting them out on the podcast. So we're gonna have to figure out a better way to do that in the future. But again, thank you so much and keep participating. We have a couple more games that we're gonna give away this month. So without further ado, I'm gonna start the tutorial now. Again, you can skip forward to it. It's gonna be a pretty short tutorial, I actually think it's gonna be pretty helpful for listening to the final review. But if you want to skip ahead, go for it. Pin Combi Trio is a game for 2 to 5 players in which the ultimate goal is to be the first player to get rid of all of your cards. Pin Combi Trio is a climbing game in which you'll play cards from your hand that are higher than the cards on the table. If you cannot play what is higher than is on the table, or choose not to, you can say pass, and you draw a card. You cannot play again until the round of cards is over, which happens when everyone but one person has passed. So let's discuss what kind of plays you can make. In Pin Combi Trio, there are 3 types of plays: the pin, the combi, and the trio. The pin is a single card from your hand. Not really anything special, but an important play nonetheless. If the starting player, for example, plays a 4, then the next person can play a higher card, if possible, and then the next, and so on, until everyone but one person has passed. The combi is a 2-card play, where you play 2 in a row. You beat the current combi on the table by playing 2 in a row that is higher than the one on the table. Finally, you have the trio, and this is probably the most interesting of the 3 plays. A trio play is when you play 3 cards that have the same difference between the cards. Like this play, it has a difference of 1. You beat the current trio by playing 3 cards that have a higher difference than the trio on the table. The values of the cards themselves don't matter, only the difference between the cards. So for example, this would be the current trio because the card difference is 3. That's mostly the game, but let me go over a few more small little details because there have been some disagreements, because when you try to use Google Translate to do the rulebook, it can come out a little bit weird. One is the last person who has not passed is the starting player for the next round, which is something you really, really want to do. One reason you want to do that is because everyone can only play the type of play that the starting player plays, which means that if the starting player decides that we're playing pins this round, we're only playing pins, even if you have an amazing trio. This is different than other climbing games in which maybe you start with a 2, but if somebody else has a pair of 2s, they beat you. And maybe if somebody plays a pair of 2s, then if somebody plays a 3, a trio, they can beat them. No, that is not the way that this game plays at all. This game is simply, if the starting player decides on pins, everybody has to play pins the whole round. If the starting player decides on trios, everybody can only play trios for that round. It's very important to be the starting player so that you can decide on that. The other thing I want to go over is just the passing thing, which I think is pretty straightforward, but I just want to reiterate again, is that even if you can play, you don't necessarily have to play. When you pass, you are going to draw the card on the top of the draw pile. You can still pass if there are no cards in the draw pile, you just simply don't get to draw the card that comes with it, which is going to happen eventually in the game. It's kind of like a self-timer because you aren't going to replenish the draw pile. Once it's gone, and those are going to be the cards that you have for the rest of the game. And I think that's about it. Those are the main questions that I covered, so I'm going to clean it all up, and we'll get to the final review. The last time we covered a Taiki Shinzawa game, we said, could use a better theme, it could use a reprint, some freshening up, some tightening of the rules a little bit, and sure enough, a couple months later, Board Game Tables comes out, and with a new re-themed version of it. I'm not really sure how I feel about the circus thing, but, you're welcome for making that happen, because I'm sure that it wasn't the hardworking team that's, for them, that did it. Just totally little YouTube that I think it got 80 views. It was definitely our doing, definitely. So you're welcome. We also covered our top 5 Taiki Shinzawa games in a podcast that you can find at the link below. That is to say that we've played a lot of his games with mixed feelings, as we've mentioned before. And so believe me when I say that this one feels a little bit different. I don't know how to explain that, how this game is different. I have an idea. Okay, so there's these chips here. Okay, they're fine. Okay, they come out in the winter. Okay, they have them all over the world, I'm sure. Okay, all it is a standard potato chip, and it's drizzled in chocolate. That's it. The potato chip is fine. The chocolate, cheap. Not great by itself. But I can't stop eating them. And that is basically how I feel about Pin Combi Trio. There is. Remember at the beginning of the review where I said, we like his games because every game feels interesting. There's something that you haven't seen before. Something new and exciting. There is nothing about this game that should make me like it very much. There is nothing that should make me want to recommend this to you, to spend money to import this. Right? There's nothing. Right? And yet, in the 2 weeks after we got sent this game, by the way, thank you. I haven't asked permission to say your name, so I'm not going to say it, but if you're watching, thank you for sending us a copy. In the 2 weeks that we've had this game, I think it has already moved into probably the top 3 most played Shinzawa games that I own. I can't stop playing it. It is like a little guilty pleasure. It is like a chocolate-covered potato chip. There is nothing about this that should work, but it does. Let's start with the theme. I didn't think this through. I got chocolate on my head. Let's start with the theme. The theme is based all around comedians, and all of them are actual likenesses of real Japanese comedians. And it's a very specific type of comedian that are featured on Japanese variety shows. My in-laws and my wife really enjoyed. They would see the cards. We'd always have to stop during the game because they would just see the card and try to figure out who exactly it was. And they'd be like, oh, that's that guy, or oh, that's that person. Okay. And that works. And we enjoyed the fact that the plays, you can call it a 1-card play, a 2-card play, a 3-card play, but the pin, the Combi, the trio. Those are the Japanese names for those kind of performers. The Pin is the name of a very specific type of comedian who goes on a variety show but is left alone, not by choice, but by circumstance. It might be that they couldn't find a partner when everybody else did, and so they're just left alone. It might be that they ended up getting stood up and now they are a solo performer in a show that is based all around group performances. So it's kind of this like, okay, they might be good by themselves, but they would have been better with somebody else, and that's the idea of the Pin. The Pin is a fine play by itself, but it would have been better had you combined it in some other way. It feels thematic for a card game that is basically just a climbing game. 535, Scout, these are some of our favorite climbing games, but we're not going to talk about the theme really much at all. But Pin Combi Trio actually feels like it kind of integrates somewhat of a theme. And I think that's really something that Shogakukan put into this game. Made sure that there was something there, because this game ultimately is a family game. Taiki Shinzawa, for many things, is not known for amazing themes here. In fact, one of the things that always kind of, I love American Bookshop as a game, but one of the things that always left me was like, it could have been really coolly done, I think, as a theme, but the thematic tie-ins with it kind of stopped at the fact that the suits were just named something. It had nothing really to do with much at all. But in this one, in Pin Combi Trio, it is on every single card. It is in the names of the types of plays that you have, and that really is something. The fact that it has this coherent theme, the idea that we can call it a pin, a combi, and a trio, and those actually make sense, mean that this game becomes something that people who don't normally play climbing games or card games can actually grasp what they're doing. And that is the important part of this game that really differentiates it from other Shinzawa games. I think a lot of Shinzawa games fall into one of two camps. Usually innovative in some way, that's not the question. There's these simple ones, the ones that are just a slight twist on something that is already familiar to many people. I think Ambient Abyssal is probably the best example of this. That is a pretty quick to grasp game that still does something innovative. But he also does things that are incredibly complex that I really wouldn't recommend playing with somebody who hasn't already had games of that genre under their belt, like Ghosts of Christmas. This one, Pin Combi Trio just feels different. This one very clearly had the goal of being a family game, of being a game that was not super complex, that people could pick it up right away, and they decided, you know what is important to that is having a theme that people like, having a cover of it that it likes, having the card quality be good. The fact that pins and combis aren't something that is completely innovative means that it's something that people actually can just think about and it makes sense. The fact that that slight mechanism change that is a bit different for climbing games, in which whatever the starting player plays, everybody else has to play the same thing, is interesting, but it also makes it much more easily approachable. I don't have to explain that a combi can beat a pin and a trio can beat a combi, so people don't have to grok a lot of things at the same time. It's just, hey, if the starting player plays a 1 card, okay, they play a 1, that's 10. Okay, they play a 1 card, they play 1 card on the table, it's 10. The next person, can you beat a 10? The next person, can you beat that or no? It's very, very quick to explain. It's very quick for people to understand. It does get a bit complicated once we get to the trio, and I think this is the one small thing that I think isn't too much of a problem unless you're with somebody who really wants to, that is prone to AP, which is the trio, because you're going to sit there and you're going to be doing a lot of math, because the way that you win the trio is by creating a difference. And so some people will say, well, I wasn't planning on playing a trio, but do I have one just kind of accidentally in my hand somewhere? Oh, I didn't catch that I had like a 5 and a 22 and a 39, and that's a difference of 17. So you're just going to sit there, and sometimes that's going to happen, and it can bog the game down a little bit. But I haven't run into a problem where that's ruined the flow of the game too much, because trios ultimately are pretty difficult to get. So people try to plan it early. And that's where I think it actually saves the game as well, is oftentimes what it feels like when you're playing this game is that there's always a possibility to win. When I explain the rules, people could all automatically understand that trios were going to get rid of 3 cards from their hand at the same time, and that these were probably the best plays if they could figure out how to do it. And so right away, my wife sets aside like 2 sets of trios from her hand, and then a couple sets of the combis, and we're just left with like 3 cards in her hand that were going to be the pins. But the interesting thing was that she ended up not doing very well, because what my father-in-law did, who doesn't play card games at all, he just said, well, I'm just going to play these pins. I'm just going to play 1 card. That'll work, right? Like, I'm just going to play 1 card. And we go around the table. 1 card. Okay, go around the table again. 1 card again. And just go. And he would just get rid of his hand really quickly. So it's always this risk. Do you want to try to hope that you can get those trios played, that you can get those combis played? Or are you going to let somebody just get rid of all of their cards from these pins? And that's where it is so important to understand that you don't have to play. You can save up, you can draw a card, you can pass and hope that later on you can get these cards that get these runs that work. But it just doesn't always work out for you. And there again lies the beauty of the game. There is nothing about this that should be that interesting. The pins are not that interesting. I've seen it a million times. The combis, there is nothing interesting about this. The trio is something kind of cool, where it's a difference instead of the cards, but, you know, it's nothing revolutionary. I don't think I'm going to see it in a ton of games now. And yet, again, we can't stop playing this game. Like a bag of these weird chips that I wouldn't say are the best potato chips with chocolate I've ever even had. And yet I just want them when I'm in the mood for it. And I keep being in the mood for it. And so the question becomes, do I recommend you import Pin Combi Trio? Because another thing that's great about this is that because it is from such a big publisher, it is one of the easiest games by Shinzawa for you to get. So do I recommend it? Because it's going to be about $20 to buy the game by itself, and then another $20 to import. Am I going to recommend to you to import a game that I wouldn't even call excellent for $40? Yes. Yes, I am. In fact, I think that if you are any kind of fan of any kind of card game, if there is even a 1% chance that you're interested in this game, I recommend you get this. I recommend you import this. Because it has been a while since I have gotten a game to the table this many times in such a short span of time. And yet, me just talking about it to you makes me want to play it again. I can teach it to anyone in a couple of minutes, and they will understand it from the first game. I don't have to say, okay, we're going to play a couple of rounds of the hands and then you're going to get it. They just get it. And it feels so good to just have a game that I can bring to game night, whether it's with my in-laws or people who are familiar with card games, with confidence that everybody's going to have a good time. Maybe not everybody's going to like chocolate-covered potato chips like these, but for some, it's going to be a delicacy that they don't really understand why it works, but it definitely does. Thank you so much for watching. ありがとうございました。